We are going to talk some Territorial Cup.
Hey!
But even deeper sigh.
Oh, man.
That football game yesterday.
Yeah, I thought the first sigh was for the football game yesterday, not 2 days ago.
No, I've been sighing a lot about these football teams in town lately.
Yeah, let's talk about it. It's our job, too.
Okay. Well, the Cardinals lose yesterday, 37-14. Okay, they lose to the Rams. Well, they usually lose to the Rams. Hopefully at some point that changes and they don't have to wait for Sean McVay to retire for it to change. But we're going to start right at the top with yesterday's game, Kellan. This was probably Kyler Murray's least impactful game in his 3 since he's come back. And I know that that's only 3 games off of a major injury, so my natural instinct is to cut him some slack. But also we're in a situation where he's basically got 8 games, and they've got 8 games to evaluate him as to whether or not this guy is the answer long term. So every game counts in that respect. And that's a loaded conversation, so let's just jump right into it because there's a lot of moving parts.
I would argue that it isn't as loaded as we think.
Really?
And I think the Cardinals had to know going into these games how they felt about Kyler Murray and what they saw on the field, unless he looked like MVP candidate Kyler Murray, should have made up their decision for them already coming in. I'm not saying these 8 games are totally useless. Don't get me wrong. They have some merit to them. But he's coming off of an ACL tear, mid-season, new team, new playbook. He said it himself after the game, like his 7th week of practicing or something like that, which is, don't get me wrong, a fair bit. But, I mean, you look at that game, he's under center, it's working, and then they just can't do it the rest of the game. And that has to be because he's just not accustomed to the playbook yet, and they were able to script that first drive, and then from there they weren't really able to turn to the under center stuff as much. I would like to think that is partially Kyler's limitations there, but also partially his limitations because he hasn't gotten familiar enough with the playbook, with those certain looks necessarily. And man, it is sticking out more and more. We're having a reality check more and more with the lack of talent on this team on both sides of the ball, but especially on offense, just how lacking they are in talent. Like you look on offense and at wideout, I think Hollywood is a good number 2 on teams. He's not a number 1 guy. Everyone else, Michael Wilson's not healthy right now, unfortunately. And unfortunately, that's been the story of his career collegiately and now as a professional so far. It's like a label that was attached to him coming into the draft. It was the reason why he was available in the Cardinals.
That's probably why they got him where they did.
And he's hurt. He looks like someone who could be something, but outside of that, like I don't see any guys like Greg Dortch is nice. He makes plays, but is he like a number 3 on a good team? Like, I don't know. Well, and then I flipped to defense, and you don't have a number 1 corner, you don't have a number 2 corner at all. And like those are 2 extremely important positions to say the least. And those types of situations where you look at the depth chart and you say like, okay, can this guy be the starter here on a good team in a year or 2? I'm saying no to like a lot of the roster. So then I turn back to Kyler, and part of me wants to say, like, what is he supposed to do?
Well, that's it.
Exactly. But the other side, Luke, is watching that game and just the inaccurate throws, the overthrows, the decision-making is just so all over the place for him in a way that it wasn't even when he was struggling last year.
You know, the what is he supposed to do? That's kind of where I was going with the moving parts of like, but what could Kyler do if you had a better team around him? What is he supposed to do? And I think that's a fair question. I think it's a question most Cardinals fans were asking themselves at some point in the game, unless you've already decided you don't want Kyler here. But at the same time, what is he supposed to do? I'm not sure. I'm not expecting wins. To me, if they haven't made up their mind yet, I wouldn't be going into these last 8 games and being like, well, if Kyler's going to be our guy, he better be able to win at least 5 or 6 games. It's not so much that. But the what is he supposed to do? I don't know what it looks like, but it looks like more than you score 8 points on the first drive and then we never hear from the offense again until the fourth quarter when the game's over. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to look like. I'm guessing they do. I'm hoping they do because the direction of this franchise for the next however many years hinges on the idea that they know what they're looking for. But I'm just telling you that even if they're not going to win games because Kyler Murray doesn't have all the pieces around him, the offense can't disappear to the point where you forget they have an offense for 2.5 quarters of a game.
Yes, and where I was the most disappointed with Kyler and where I felt it was the most inexcusable in his performance was coming out of halftime. it's a 13-point game somehow. They are still very much in it. They're getting the ball first. You put up points in any kind of way, a field goal or a touchdown, you're right back in this thing all of a sudden. Your defense has had time to rest like they didn't for the entire rest of the first half. Like that was the only rest they got pretty much the rest of the game until it was pretty much over in garbage time. But then you look at those two drives, and I don't know about you, but it felt like Kyler saw the tweets about his lack of targeting Hollywood Brown and the lack of a connection there because he kept forcing it to him all the time. That first drive, it's 3rd and 7. There's a holding call that nullifies the throw anyway. Maybe Kyler thought it was a free play instead, but he throws it into triple coverage to Hollywood Brown, and Hollywood immediately realizes, like, I'm a defensive back now.
Yeah.
And he has to go up and deflect the pass. They punt. Their second drive, they start to get something going. They go under center and run a bootleg for 18 yards. Interesting. Maybe keep doing that. I don't know. Hollywood.
One of those plays, the defense is like, man, I hope they don't run that again, and then they just didn't.
Yeah, it was interesting to say the least. And then he finds Hollywood for 17 yards. There's an incompletion, but then a completion to Dortch for the 12. All of a sudden, we're cooking. We've got some momentum. We're on the 30. Oh, there's a flag for illegal. Man down to field. You gotta be freaking kidding me. And then on 3rd and 6. He throws a check down to Hollywood 3 yards out that isn't even open. And it's like, what are you seeing? Do you think it's 4-down territory at that point? And then Prater misses, and then that's the game right there. It's over. That part of the game to me was like, okay, if Kyler is a solid NFL quarterback, he has to produce better than that over those two drives at that point in the game, because you know those moments in games for quarterbacks where it's the second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, whenever it is situationally, you're like, I need you to go get me points right now, quarterback. Like, I need you to do that. You're getting all of this money. You are a good, great, however you want to define Kyler, fine quarterback, whatever you are. This is the moment when those good to great quarterbacks go get your team points when they need it in the flow of the game before it either gets out of hand or you need to keep control of the game. And it was just so disappointing to see the way that he performed there, especially at the start of the second half.
It was, and that start of the second half was just symbolic of the whole team right now because, yeah, he's not looking like the answer right now. It doesn't mean he can't be, but right now on November 26th, yesterday, he didn't look like the answer. But he's also not getting a whole lot of help around him. I'll just say this. I mean, I went into that game. Anybody that watched the morning games yesterday, here's the quarterbacks you watched, okay? You watched Will Levis, Bryce Young, Jake Browning, Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Gardner Minshew. Like, it was Tommy DeVito, Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi. Like, we watched horrible quarterback play. So just perceptually, the bar was about as low as it could be going into the afternoon games. And Kyler's better than all those guys. But they're not making a decision to try to win 8 games versus 5 games next year. They're trying to figure out who the franchise quarterback is for this team for the next 5+ years.
And believe me, we in this town know better than most franchises and fan bases what that's like when you have a quarterback out there who clearly can't win you a Super Bowl. It's a hopeless kind of feeling, and you're hoping to turn it around the other way that that's not going to be an issue for them going forward, whether it is Kyler Murray becoming that franchise quarterback. I said becoming, by the way. I said it during our crosstalk. Like, Bickley terrified me when he called Kyler a work in progress, and I was like, he's not wrong, and that's terrifying to me.
Because we're a few years into
or
this.
you draft that guy, and that guy becomes the new guy. Like, I don't know. Either way, it needs to be. We can all agree, and like ending this game, ending this season, like this has to be figured out. You can't go into next year and be like, oh well, let's see. Like, we're going to revamp the roster. Like, we're done with let's see. It has to be defined by the end of this year.
You're probably right now. You have a top 2 pick in a draft where there are 2 pretty clear quarterbacks at the top. No guarantees that either one of those guys are going to be any better than Kyler in the NFL. But you have a top 2 pick at this exact moment.